But remains a curious question. Can it be possible that a man can be so much reduced to be this tiny sphere of 1.5 millimeters? Does it is possible that it is the most simple formula? You know, the algebraists like to reduce the formula to its simplest form, and is that possible that the formula of man can be reduced that way? Well, the fact is not only that it's possible, but it is right. And the reason why we know it, it's because we can stop the process of manifestation of life. That can be made by lowering the temperature. In Latin and in French, and also a little in English, we use the same word to define the heat that we measure with a thermometer and the duration that we measure with a pendulum or with a clock. In French we say temps and température. In English you can say tempo and temperature. In Latin it's the same word. And that again is not a poverty of the vocabulary, but it is a definition of something which was very difficult to understand before we knew the particulate nature and the Brownian movement, that what we call heat, what we call temperature, is just the speed of the molecule measured with a thermometer with the number of heat. And what we call time is in fact the flux of this energy through this movement. So if we slow down the movement, by lowering the temperature, what we do is to slow down the time inside this cell. And that's explain why we can use cryopreservation, we can make congelation of living cells, and once they are in liquid nitrogen, they don't move, they have no metabolism, and apparently they're entirely dead. But no one of us would pretend that they are dead, because we know that if we give them back the temperature, the normal temperature, then they will manifest their life again. Then we are obliged to know that when we make congelation, what we are congelating is not the cell, it's not the life, we are congelating the time. We are freezing the time. And when the cell is kept in this frozen time, then there is no change occurring. There is no aging if the frost is very deep. It has to be as deep as possible. Liquid nitrogen is not deep enough, but we use liquid nitrogen in biology because it does not cost too much and it does not explode. Liquid hydrogen is much lower in temperature and would produce a much better preservation for a long time. But nevertheless, liquid nitrogen is rather cool, and it allows to keep the cell not moving, not breathing, not doing anything for years. And the embryos are just as resistant as ordinary cells, so that embryos can be frozen. But curiously, an egg before fecundation cannot be frozen. It can be frozen in the sense of being refrigerated, but it will not survive when it comes back to normal temperature. And we do not know really why the fact that the entry of the sperm has so much changed the physical structure of the egg that now it resists to congelation and it can be thawed. Although if it was before fecundation that you had congelated the egg, it would not survive. That proves, again, that the change at the moment of conception is physically irreversible and makes a total difference between an egg and a new individual. That was the introduction of what I wanted to discuss now. Have been long, but science is very patient to try to see around, to gather the information. Because what I would like to discuss now is what can we do to convince people that life and human life is so precious that it should be preserved with the utmost care. And I would just propose to you a broad review of what we can use as arguments. And to try to make some order, I will follow the Spirit. That is, use the 7 gifts of the Spirit to do that. The first gift is wisdom. And I would propose that the best wisdom would be the popular wisdom, the one which for generation has made sexual education of all the babies of the world. Not only the grannies in the English-speaking countries, but the great mother everywhere on the globe. There is one story which has been told to every children in the world. It's a story of very tiny human beings living inside a sheltered underground world in which wonders are happening to them. The story of Tom Thumb, of the little man smaller than the thumb, has been spelled in every language since the beginning of humanity, for a very simple reason, that the grannies had the wisdom to tell to the next generation that they had been a tiny Tom Thumb in the womb of their mother. And it's still true today, and still you can tell to the children this story and they will understand it, and even grown up, if you tell it with details, would be interested about it, because it remembers them of something of which the memory is very poor, but which has been so deeply imprinted. At the time they were not thinking at all, but they were feeling that they still have what I would call an unconscious memory. Well, probably you do not believe me, but I would show you one wonder which is not yet achieved, but which already exists, and which is related to the curious ectopic pregnancy I was talking previously. You remember that the little cosmonaut is building his capsule, its space capsule, and he has a capsule with 3 envelopes. One is the amnios, and is inside it. I think you can just notice the feet, the hand, and the head here. Now, around it is the chorionic system, and around it, all those hairs that you see are, in fact, the velocity of the chorion. They have been made by the baby. Now, this baby has been removed, and it has been opened so that you see together inside and outside. But that time, if you were looking at a healthy baby, you would see that this big one all around, and you would not see the baby at all inside. Now, when you look closer, you would see that in fact those velocities are not loose, but they are hooked to each other by a membrane which makes it another cavity. And this cavity is the intervillosity cavity has an enormous significance, because here are the vessels of the mother, and the placenta is not yet made, so that what exudates a kind of edema coming out of the vessel of the mother goes inside here. Those vessels are the vessels of the baby, so that the baby is getting its fluids and its oxygen by an exchange system of fluid with not any connection with the blood of the mother. It needs only some exudate surrounding the whole thing. Now, it seems very likely that if an ectopic pregnancy was removed with great care and put back inside the uterus with enough of tubal fluid, it would survive and it would implant in the uterus. There are all the reasons to believe that it is possible. There are two publications that Professor May brought to my attention, but unfortunately they are old and they are not very precise. But probably in our time of graft, the idea of grafting the early baby, that is a term sum, before 2 months, before 3 months of age, is still a possibility. After 3 months, when he has built the placenta, that the blood of the mother circulates inside the placenta, the removal and the implantation would have a time of maybe many hours in which the baby will be without nourishment and it would die anyway. But earlier, as the 2nd month, probably this transplantation will be feasible. And without being utterly a prophet, I would guess that one day you will read in the newspaper as a headline, the transplantation of a tubal pregnancy has been a success and is now achieved, and now when a pregnancy is out of the uterus, we can transfer it. By all likelihood, nature is ready for us to help her to do that.